I'm Jake Monaco, the composer for Be Cool Scooby-Doo, and you're listening to a podcast named Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
Hey gang, and welcome to another episode of a podcast named Scooby-Doo, the show that attempts to unravel 50 years of mysteries, meddling kids, and masked villains. My name is Mike Josick, and I'll be your guide through all things ghostly and groovy as I investigate every angle of every mystery and beyond. So grab yourself some Scooby snacks, fire up the mystery machine, and let's start the show.
What are you implying?
What are you inferring?
I'm only inferring what you're implying.
And what are you implying you're inferring from what I'm implying?
Exactly what you're inferring?
Welcome back to the podcast. We've got another great show here for you this week, featuring part 2 of my interview with Be Cool Scooby-Doo and Scooby Apocalypse writer DeMatteis. Now, if you haven't heard the first part, I'd probably go back and listen to that one first and then come back and rejoin us here. Otherwise, you're going to miss out on a lot of really great Be Cool Scooby-Doo chatter and the beginning of our Scooby Apocalypse conversation. But if you've already heard the first part, then you kind of know where this is going. JM and I continue our discussion about Scooby Apocalypse, about the character dynamics, where the story is going, and a little bit about animation in general. Before we jump into that conversation, just want to apologize for not getting the episode up last week as promised. I think I promised anyways. I'm suffering a little bit of burnout. I think June took a little too much of a toll on me than I thought it would, running 2 podcasts with an episode every week. And yeah, I just needed a little bit of a break. So hopefully that hasn't interfered with anybody's expectations or rocked your world or anything. I just really needed to not have any podcasting on the plate. I have, however, continued the blog posting, my Scooby-Doo versus the Aliens. As it turns out, I discovered that Alien Covenant it was released on digital download August 1st, and it's on Blu-ray and home video on August 15th. So I thought I was getting increasingly farther and farther away from sort of the purpose of posting those Scooby versus the Aliens posts, but seeing as how now the Blu-ray is coming out, I'm still kind of relevant. So as long as I can get those posts done in the time frame between the theatrical release and the Blu-ray release of Alien Covenant, I think I will be happy with that. And I think there's probably only 2 posts left. 1 post to finish off the TV episodes, 1 post to deal with the direct-to-video films. Now, it's also been brought to my attention that I missed an episode in my last post, the episode Punk Rock Scooby, which, just based on the title, kind of makes sense why it slipped my mind and I didn't get to it. I will catch up with that in the next blog post. So anybody who is ready to start pointing the finger and be like, hey, I'm on it, I got it. Who's got 2 thumbs and is going to fix that? This guy right here. And just a reminder where you can check those blog posts out. It's called A Blog Named Scooby-Doo, which is the official podcast blog, and it's located at scoobydoocast.wordpress.com. Now, with that out of the way, I see no lawful impediment to keep you from hearing part 2 of the JM DeMatteis interviews, so I will let you guys get to that, and I will meet you for my outro on the other side. Enjoy.
Hey gang, check this out!
Do we want to...
Go ahead.
I was going to say, do we want to talk about the Rufus Dinkley?
I was just thinking about Rufus. What a great villain, huh?
So familiar. It's so contemporary.
Somehow reminiscent of, I can't quite put my finger on it. Yeah. And yet, the great thing about any fictional character is it doesn't matter what you base it on, they will become their own character once they hit the page. So yes, it's not exactly subtle basing him on Trump, He's a big fat narcissist who lives in a tower, but once he hits the page, he becomes more than that. He's not just a satire on Donald Trump. He becomes a character in his own right. And I've really enjoyed the wife, who has, just in the course of a few issues, has grown and changed, and she's going to be traveling with the gang for a while, and we'll see lots of different layers and levels to her. But yeah, we needed a good villain that wasn't just a monster, and he was really the biggest monster of them all, you know?
There was definitely some surprises in that last issue. Everything from the one brother who apparently has committed suicide to the fact that there's now apparently going to be another person traveling with the gang.
Yeah.
And the question as to what are the monsters doing, and is Rufus done? Are we done with Rufus?
It's comic book. You can't ever say it's done. I honestly, personally, you know, it's in the end, you know, Keith will do whatever he wants regardless. I hope we're not, because he's such a good character, and he's such a bastard. You know, he's just such a bastard that, you know, like I said, because we had issue after issue of them fighting monsters, but you know, the monsters were monsters, and this was a human being with personality that we could really, in the classic old movie sense, you know, you could hiss that villain really well. So I liked him. I enjoyed writing him, and I hope that even though the last we saw of him, he was being burned alive. Who knows what can happen?
Was that a
where nanites are floating around and all kinds of strange things happen?
Was that a Wicker Man reference at the end there?
Yeah, it was, absolutely.
I heard, I think it was in the early interviews back in issue 1, you were saying that Zombieland was an influence on your approach to the book.
Right. In terms of, you know, when Keith and I were talking about the tone, the idea was, you know, we're known for the humor that we bring to what we do. We work together, and we wanted humor in this book, but we wanted to take the horror seriously. You know, I am not a big zombie fan, but I loved Zombieland because it was a wonderful balance. It was very character-based. It's exactly what we're doing. I mean, first and foremost is the characters. The characters in Zombieland were really interesting. They had interesting relationships. There was a lot of humor, but the horror was horror, you know? It wasn't goofy zombies, you know? The zombies were threatening, horrible zombies. And so we wanted a similar balance. We wanted nice, first and foremost, rooting in the characters, a nice layer of humor in there, but we wanted to take the horror aspects of the story seriously.
The hospital in issue, I think it was 8. Mm-hmm. The weird,
the living hospital.
Yeah, the weird fever dreamy kind of thing when they escape. I was honestly surprised that we didn't kind of come back to that within sort of like an issue or two to sort of explain the sort of mystery of what was going on there. Is that something that's part of the greater mystery of the book, or is that something that was just like one and done, or?
It could be either. It could be one and done, and you have to figure it out for yourself, or it could be something that we I would like to return to it because it was a fascinating thing. Because it was the first time we saw that it wasn't just people mutated into monsters. That somehow the nanites had merged these people.
Oh, so this is another Keith thing, just throwing something at you.
Yeah, and then it's up. I got to figure it out, you know. So Keith, what is this? Okay, I'll figure it out. Okay, you know, but I love the concept that the people that work in the hospital after the nanite plague had somehow merged with the hospital. The hospital had absorbed them, and so it became a living nightmare. That the entire building was a nightmare, and that was a really cool concept and something I would like to revisit. Because the thing with the nanites, we've hardly scratched the surface of what those nanites. First of all, we know that the Dinkley brothers took Velma's plan and altered the nanites and changed it in an attempt to control the populace. But there's still that next step of what happened they changed something that changed the nanites, and we've hinted, and I don't want to get too into it, that the nanites themselves have become conscious in a way, and that they sort of developed their own programming. So that's still the bigger mystery that we have not solved, is exactly what happened from, you know, Velma's trying to create a golden age. Her brothers are trying to create their own version of a golden age where they control everybody. And then something else happens that transforms the populace not into little sheep, but into monsters. So we still need to know what the heck happened there. And we've got a couple more brothers out there that we have to go looking for in our search for answers.
The book's got quite a slow burn to it. I wondered if that was not to be crass, but kind of like a structural thing for the trade, or if that was something that you planned.
Not at all. It's just sort of the way the story unfolded itself. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of right for the trade or any of that stuff. The story has to lead you. You can't lead the story. If there's any one lesson I learned from doing this for so many years, that's it. The story's in control. The characters are in control. And now maybe, at some point somebody says, do a 6-issue arc because they want to collect it, but that hasn't come up very often for me, where people have told me, to do it like that. And certainly not with Scooby. We're just going the way we're going, and we're letting the story unfold. And I think it was good that it was a slow burn because it allowed us to focus on the characters and their relationships a lot more. And now it feels like it's really picking up speed. We've gone on quite a journey, just a journey that Velma and Daphne have gone on together, from really, really, really not liking and not trusting each other to actually, becoming friends, even though Daphne still chokes a little when she says it, But they're friends now. In fact, the whole group, the fun of this also has been that, we see the cartoons and they all know each other. They're all part of the same gang. Well, here they're basically, aside from the fact that Fred and Daphne know each other, they're strangers. And they come together. Scooby vaguely knew Velma just because they worked in the same place, but they weren't buddies. And so we watch these 5 people really, when you include Scooby, who was very much part of that group, as they get to come together and really become a team, and even more important, really become friends. And that for me has been probably the most fun of writing the book.
Despite being sort of a riff on the original concept, most of the characters are pretty recognizable. They're pretty true, both in their actions and appearance, like, Velma, Shaggy. Mm-hmm. Daphne seems to be the biggest departure.
Yeah.
She's a very angry person. I was wondering why the choice was made to go that hostile with Daphne, or if that maybe she was so milquetoast like in the show that. Well,
yeah, and we live in an era where we want to have some nice kick-ass women characters out there. Keith kind of got that ball rolling in the plot, and I just picked up on it, and she became sort of the warrior queen in a lot of ways. She's the leader, she's the tough one. But as Fred keeps bringing up time and again, I don't know if this issue was out yet, but there's a bit of dialogue where he says, we keep talking about her like she's a soldier and she's like this tough thing, but I know her. I know what's underneath there, basically. She's not just that. There's a lot more going on there, and he's worried about her, that taking on this role of the tough, kick-ass woman is going to come back and bite her in the end, So there's more to her. We were talking at one point, I hope we get to do it, about the way we did the Velma backstory issue, to do a Daphne backstory issue and see what it is that shaped her. We know that she's very rich, and I've suggested that she was raised by a father who kind of raised her like a son. And then there's the whole question of her career in journalism, where she took a precipitous fall, and ended up on that ridiculous late night show on the Knitting Channel. And so she has a very interesting backstory. And then I love the relationship between her and Fred, where he's just constantly, he can't help himself. He keeps proposing to her, and he's been doing it since college,
Considering
Sorry. Go ahead. That's all right.
I was just going to say, considering the structure of the book and where we joined these characters in issue 1, you mentioned wanting to go back and do like a Daphne story. We've got the Scrappy backstory, and Shaggy and Scooby had that backstory in issue 1.
Right.
I mean, it really does lend itself to kind of revisiting these characters outside the main story.
Yeah.
And doing more backstories.
I would love to do more of that. Absolutely. And hopefully down the line we will. Because one of the things I enjoy doing in the scripting part is layering in these things, through dialogue, which gives you hints of what their backstory is, and what they've been through and what brought them here. I mean, the whole sort of, Fred and Daphne thing was really created through the dialogue. And I love that relationship. I love that she's in charge and he's the loyal puppy just following her around. So he is really Scooby-Doo to her Shaggy in a way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because he is the absolutely loyal puppy. And it'll be interesting if we can push that relationship and maybe break it a little bit just to see what happens to Fred.
I'm just hoping we get to see some Knitting Channel era Fred and Daphne.
Yeah. I would love to see more of that too. Just see what it was just, in this horrible, cheesy, late night, a 2-bit documentary show, quasi-documentary show.
Now, I find myself, when I read the issues, I actually hear the character voices as performed by like the cast. Do you hear the character voices when you're?
I don't. People talk a lot about with writers that find a voice of an actor that you know and you like and use it for that character. And I will do that sometimes, but what I find happens inevitably, even if I do that, eventually the character creates its own voice that has nothing to do with the voice I may have in my head, you know? And so I do not hear those voices, maybe because I don't know them as well as you do, but they begin to have voices of their own. You know, I sort of, in my own head, I hear what Velma sounds like, what Daphne would sound like, what Fred would sound like, you know? Fred should probably, to me, would sound like Dwayne Hickman, but he doesn't. He just sounds like Fred, you know? They're, you know, and then they each have their own rhythms in the way they speak, you know. And so I like also that they're very distinctive. You know, Velma speaks in a very specific way. Shaggy speaks in a very specific way. Obviously, Scooby speaks in a very specific way, and that's great when you have characters that are that distinctive, you know. And so their voices become their own voices and not anybody else's voices for me.
Do you think working on the show has sort of helped keep that, I guess, in tune with the original characters?
Oh, I think it did. I think it might have been different had I not done, 5 episodes of Be Cool. But I think working on the show, it was like it took me and dipped me in the pool of Scooby-Doo, you know. So when I came out, I had a coating of Scooby on me, and and that went with me into the comic, you know. So absolutely, I think working on the animated series absolutely helped me in terms of what I brought to the characters in the comic book. It might have been very different had I never written for that show. It might have been a lot worse.
You said John put you through Scooby-Doo school. I was curious what Scooby-Doo school entailed.
You know, it really just meant, what their take was, on the characters, who they were, how the stories were structured, what you needed in every episode, and working on an episode, you had to keep a lot of different things in mind, and you need to have this clue show up in this part of the first act, and this has to happen in the second act. It was very specific. It was like a jigsaw puzzle, and then specific things, in the cartoon. Daphne always had some different obsession every episode that took her off on some crazy thing. In the giant one that I did, Giant Problems, she decides she's going to start talking with a Scottish accent. Or the one of John's episodes, I think, where she's into the puppets and she's talking to everybody through these little hand puppets. And so there was always something very specific to each character that had to be happening in each episode, along with the clues and the mystery and the comedy, and then the scene where there's a song playing. And I have to say, I got to actually write a song for one episode, the dog show, Worston Show, when they're running around. There's a talent show in the dog show, and it's Daphne and Scooby singing a song that I wrote.
Nice.
Yeah. I always
for a minute I thought maybe you got to write one of the romps, and I was thinking that's badass.
No, this was something that they sing in the talent show. I don't know, it might be cut down to 37 seconds. I don't know, but I joke. I spent many years playing in bands and writing songs and striving to be a rock and roll star, so that my dreams came true in an episode of Scooby-Doo. It's very funny.
I've heard that in animation it's very common for writers to try and work a song into their episode because then you get more royalties off the song. Because the song counts separately from... Yes,
it does count separately, and the truth is that in animation we don't get residuals. Regular TV, you get residuals. This has been an ongoing battle for years, and the Writers Guild has tried to get the animators into the Writers Guild so they could fight for those things. And the writers are not part of the Writers Guild; they're part of the Animation Guild. It's a whole very complicated thing. What's even weirder is I will get checks from the Writers Guild for overseas airings of my animated shows, but I get no residuals for the shows as they air. So, but yes, I remember speaking to a friend a few years ago who had written some songs for one of his shows, and he says, I get residuals on the songs. I don't get residuals for writing the show. But the reason I ended up writing the song was that, John is a musician, I'm a musician, so we bonded over our mutual musicianship. And at one point he just said, hey, if you ever feel like you want to write something for the show, do it. And I had this talent show, and I suddenly got something in my head, and I literally just sat down and banged it out at the piano, put it on a little MP3, and sent it off to John. He said, okay, let's use it.
On the episodes we've seen, it's never been, there's been a few little musical numbers. It's never felt forced. It always feels part of the story. So
and this really is part of the story because it's a talent show. It's a big sort of top hat and tails, Fred and Ginger kind of number, which hopefully, I can't wait to see that one.
Now, do you have a favorite character or character to write for? And I realize it's probably different between the show and the comic book, or maybe it's not.
I think I said before I really enjoy Shaggy, because I identify with him the most. Shaggy and Scooby, in a weird way, for those who know our Justice League work, they're like the Blue Beetle and Booster Gold of this book.
Yeah.
And but I really like them all. I really, really do. I enjoy them all. I love the dynamic between Daphne and Velma. It's been a great dynamic and a great fun to write. And maybe they're the fire and ice of this book, So I don't know where that quite leaves Fred. Or maybe he's the Martian Man. Martian
Manhunter.
And he is in a way. She's the most level-headed in some ways, except where Daphne's concerned. But when you engage with these characters, you have to fall in love with them. If you don't fall in love with them, including the villains, you can't write the book. You have to be completely in love with these characters and totally committed to them. And so I really, really, although I probably identify with Shaggy the most, I really love them all.
I have to ask, Scooby in the first issue, I believe, his designation with the complex is 24602. I was wondering if there was a significance to that or if that was just a number.
It was just my love of Les Miserables. Jean Valjean is 24601. So I made Scooby 24602.
Fair enough. There's definitely, knowing your guys' work and knowing, very early on saying that there was kind of a Zombieland influence and just picking up on stuff, I feel that, not everything has to be, coming from somewhere secret or interesting, but, something like that, I had to ask.
Yeah, no, and we, it's not like we one thing Keith and I don't have much is plans. We love the spontaneity of what we're doing. We have a sense of where the story's going, but that may change 5 times in a given week. Keith may tell me about, here's what I'm going to do, and then call me up the next week and go, here's what I'm going to do, and it's something completely different, and I love that. For some people, I don't think they could deal with the uncertainty, But for me, we have such a relationship of trust, and Keith is so damn brilliant at what he does that I don't ever have to worry about it, The same way that he doesn't worry about me. He's done with the plot, off it goes, and he doesn't look back, But then I'll just, the little things come up just for fun. It makes it amusing. And I've like I said earlier, I've tried, just because it is a Scooby-Doo book, to pepper in these little Hanna-Barbera references, and God knows I have checked Scoobypedia many times in the course of working on this book, just to get little things that might inspire me or little things I could drop in, to understand who the characters were. You have to get some sense, even if you're totally changing something, you have to know what it is before you change it. Do you know what I mean? You just
it's like you have to know how to sing before you can sing badly.
Right, exactly. I hope we're not singing badly. So you have to have a sense of who these people were, what their dynamic was before, in order to play with it and change it. So I have definitely gone and researched stuff, and thank God for the internet and Wikipedia and Scoobypedia and all this stuff. But the actual writing is very, very spontaneous. How do I say this without sounding like an idiot? But I don't think very much when I'm writing this book. It's
very Shaggy of you.
I'm a very intuitive writer. I always have been. When you get your basic skill set down, and that's what I think every writer hopes for. You get your skill set down, you know the basic rules, and then you give your unconscious rein. You don't get in the way of your unconscious. You write intuitively and from your unconscious and let it spill out. And especially in terms of dialogue like this, just let it spill out. And then when I'm done, my conscious mind comes back in. I'll look over the script. I may make some changes and neaten things up. But the heart and soul of it is just sort of letting it rip, and letting these characters say and do what they want to do.
I have to say, it still surprises me, even after following your work and Keith's work, and your work together in particular, for as long as I have. I was there at the beginning of Justice League. And knowing what your dynamic is, just hearing you sometimes say, I hope that character comes back, and there's just this, you don't know, you're getting the plots, and you're getting it in the way that we're sort of getting it.
Yeah, a lot of times that is the way it is. Like I said, I probably talk to Keith more than anybody in the business that I talk. We may talk 2-3 times a week, and we'll talk about stories. But in the end, that part of the process is in his hands, and the other part of the process is in my hands. So I am surprised, and that's always been a great part of what we do. He surprises me, and I surprise him.
Do you ever make requests?
Oh, absolutely. And we'll talk, and I'll say, what if we do this? And he'll go, yeah, let's do that. So it's not that we're completely isolated. Certainly whenever we're doing anything related to Justice League, my first request is, can we get Nord in there somewhere? And like I said, then I will add plot points in the script that he will then pick up on in the book and things like that. But then it's his freedom to do whatever the hell he wants that keeps it interesting for me. because it's like, okay, we were going to do this, but wait, what's this? Okay, this is fun. I'm going to figure this out, and off we go. But yeah, but we absolutely do talk about the stories. But I know even when we're talking about the stories and I'm making suggestions, that in the end that's his business and the dialogue is my business.
So how long do you think this is going to go for? How far have you guys planned ahead and
planned ahead?
How long are the legs on this thing? Yeah, I suppose where we're going we don't need plans. Yeah. We have general ideas. I know that we want to go out and find the other Dinkley brothers and go on the road, and we have to uncover the mystery of that. But then we've talked about, once that aspect is done, it can open up a whole other doorway to other stories that I don't want to necessarily talk about. So I think this book, as long as it sells, could go on for years. I really do. We were on Justice League for 5 years, and that included 2 monthly books and a quarterly and miniseries and spin-offs and all kinds of things. So, I could see Scooby going on for 5 years. I could also see DC canceling it tomorrow. It's not my decision. It's not my decision, but certainly if it keeps selling and they want to keep doing it, we're in, because we're having so much fun. I was actually kind of relieved when I heard that Scoob had been pushed to 2020, because there's often that pressure to the whole synergy thing to align all the different.
What is this? The new Scooby-Doo movie? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, the new.
It's called Scoob.
It's an acronym. Yeah, it's SCOOB.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's probably best we don't talk about it.
I don't know anything about it, so that's okay.
I haven't heard good things from behind the scenes, but I guess it just got pushed. It was supposed to come out next year.
Oh, really?
And it got pushed to 2020. And
maybe we can get an animated Scooby Apocalypse out there before then, huh?
Exactly. This is what I'm saying. Because so often the companies will try to create synergy with all of their different products. They want the comic books to look like the movies, and the movies to look like the cartoon, But
Scooby-Doo has had so many interpretations over the years. And even now at DC, there's our book, there's Scooby-Doo Team Up, which is a totally different animal.
This is true.
So I think there's room for lots of different interpretations, and I would love to see that apply more, frankly, to the superheroes too. There's room for all different versions of Superman and Batman and Spider-Man. They don't have to all line up. And certainly, we've crafted our own little world here, and it doesn't mean someone else can't go off and create another world that's different. As long as people feel that the characters resonate with them, that's all that really matters, and it has that there's something in there that feels like authentic Scooby-Doo to them. And I hope that's what we've done. That in the end, however different this may be, that at its core it still feels like authentic Scooby-Doo.
Year 2, we finished year 1.
Yeah.
And we got to sort of understand a little bit more of the Nanites and the Plague. And to the reveal of the 4, basically. Is year 2 building towards a confrontation with Scrappy?
It's happening for me as we speak. Yes, it is. Not the whole year, but I mean I just finished an issue where Scrappy has caught up with them, and they have their confrontation, but then something else happens that turns the whole thing on its head. So yeah, you get to see Scrappy and Scooby and Cliffy and our gang all come together.
So to bring this back around to the beginning, create a nice bookend. Previously you said you hadn't had much experience with Scooby-Doo. Now that you've worked on it, have you gone back and revisited the original show or any of the other shows?
No. I have not. I may have in my research looked up certain things and looked for little clips on YouTube and things like that, but no, I can't say that I have gone back. I've read about the various shows and what how they've changed over the years and what they did, but no, I haven't spent a day watching old Scooby-Doo cartoons.
All right.
Although that is one of the great things of what I do for a living. There are those certain days where, my wife will say, "So what did you do today?" So I had to watch a bunch of cartoons and read a bunch of comic books, and it's like it's my job. It was research, and it's my job, which is a really that's when the 12-year-old in my soul is like, can't believe what it is I do for a living.
That's usually what I say when I'm binging a season of Scooby-Doo. I'll just be like, it's for the podcast.
Right. How long have you been doing this podcast?
This particular podcast, 6 months.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I put out an episode a month, and the whole idea was I'm a big fan of bonus features, and I noticed that Warner's was never really dedicated to for animation fans, I mean, for a property that's been around for as long as it has, there's very, very little kind of historical or background or any added value content other than like, here's Shaggy and Scooby singing karaoke or whatever music video for your kids. And I mean, there's a lot of people who've worked on this franchise, and there's been a lot of different iterations, and nobody really talks to anybody about the behind the scenes stuff. So I thought, if it doesn't exist, make it. So
yeah, that's great. That's great. So you talked to people from all the different versions.
Yeah. The goal is to talk to like anybody and everybody who's basically touched the property.
Oh, that's great. Well, considering how long this has been around, you got a lot of people out there to talk to.
Yeah, it's funny how many people too are like, I don't really want to talk about that.
Really?
Yeah, there's been a couple who've just been like, it's a period of their life. They must have had a bad experience. I know one of them actually, it did have to do with their handling by the studio. But yeah, I don't know. I think some people might do it as a job and then just don't really want to go back to it.
Right. I guess so.
And not everybody's as invested as like the fans are, right? So.
Right, that's true.
So yeah, I guess we can finish it off there.
Okay, that's great.
And yeah.
So this for me, it's like, who knew I'd ever be writing Scooby-Doo, let alone talking about it for an hour,
Yeah. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Excellent.
Okay, great. Well, good to talk to you, Mike. I'm glad we finally got to do it.
Yeah, no kidding. Would you be cool maybe doing this again at the end of like year 2 of Apocalypse?
Absolutely.
Check back in? All right.
Absolutely. You know where to find me. Yeah. All right. Well, you take care, and then we'll talk 6 months down the line or whatever it is.
I'll start emailing you next week so that we can arrange for 6 months from now.
The time. That's right. That's a very good idea. And let's both hope that the book is still being published then,
Absolutely. Yeah. You guys are doing good work.
Take care.
All right. See you later. So that concludes my conversation with Scooby Apocalypse and Be Cool Scooby-Doo writer J.M. DeMatteis. I hope you enjoyed part 2 as much as you may have enjoyed part 1. Like everybody who's been on the show, J.M. was a joy to talk to. It's also really nice just talking to somebody who's been in the business for as long as he has and still has so much interest and so much invested in the work. I mean, J.M. has been writing for roughly 40-odd years in comic books, and he seems to be tackling projects with the same sort of verve and energy now that he did back in the day, which is fabulous. And if you're not already a fan of JM and your curiosity is piqued, or if you are a fan and you just don't know where to find him or what he has coming out, as you've probably guessed, there's Scooby Apocalypse over at DC Comics, as well as Blue Beetle, which he's co-writing with Keith Giffen, his collaborator on Scooby Apocalypse. At Boom Studios, there's a Hero Squared Omnibus coming out this month, which is another project he collaborated on with Keith. At IDW, look for The Adventures of Augusta Wind, The Last Story, which is Volume 2 of the 2-part Augusta Wind fantasy epic. They're also reprinting an old book that JM wrote back when Vertigo launched in the 90s called The Last One. Vertigo was the adult imprint for DC comic books. And another one of his Vertigo titles, Seekers into the Mystery, is getting a complete collection from IDW, which I'm pretty excited about. I was a big fan of Seekers at the time when it first came out, so looking forward to checking that out. And although there are no episodes that have aired yet, JM is also writing for the upcoming Marvel's Spider-Man. So watch for that when that comes to, I believe, Disney XD. If you want to find JM on the web, he has a website, www.jmdmateis.com. You can find him on Twitter. His handle is @jmdmateis. He's on Facebook, facebook.com/jmdmateis. I'd strongly urge you to check out his work. Some of my favorites include Moonshadow, Brooklyn Dreams, the aforementioned Seekers into the Mystery. If you like Scooby Apocalypse, you might like Justice League 3000, which he worked on also with Keith Giffen and artist Howard Porter, who was the original artist on Scooby Apocalypse. That's a really neat take on the Justice League and superheroes in general. It takes place in the year 3000, and it's kind of like a strange cousin to Scooby Apocalypse. When you read it, if you read it, you'll know what I'm talking about. They do sort of go hand in hand. I wish I would have asked JM about that when we were talking, but we were focusing so much on the Scooby, I didn't really go outside the boundaries. Maybe when we sit down to talk about year 2 of Apocalypse, I will throw that his way. Now, if you have any comments about this podcast or this episode, you can find me on Facebook, facebook.com/ScoobyDooCast. I'm also on Twitter @ScoobyDooCast. I'm also on Instagram at a podcast named Scooby-Doo. Like, follow, share across the board, spread the word, helps the show grow. You can also find the show on iHeartRadio and Stitcher, and if you get the show off of iTunes, strongly encourage you to rate and review the show. Rating super simple. Reviewing takes a little bit more time, but not a lot. Love to hear what you think of the show. And any comments from you, the listener, I will read on a future episode. So a little encouragement to maybe throw out some words of comment. Now, I don't have anything else to say, and I think I'm kind of borderline rambling here, so I'm going to end this right here, right now. Thank you so much for listening. Couldn't do this without your support. Hope you come back next time, where I should be talking to Be Cool Scooby-Doo composer Jake Monaco. So watch for that. Thanks again for listening, and stay cool.
Everybody cheer! This is how we solve the mystery. This is how we solve the mystery. So in summation, this narration is my donation to the art of mystery solving dictation. And here's what the bad guys say when they play where the law forbids.
Would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you meddling kids.
This is how we solve the mystery. Bye.